Hey everybody, my name is James Graham. I was suggested or asked to make a video for the Atheists of Facebook online convention, and so I'll make a video, but I really haven't had time to prepare that much because of some unforeseen events that's happened in the past few weeks. But I thought I'd throw something together and talk about a few things, maybe how religion has affected me during my life. And I excuse the lighting in here, it's not very good. But I thought I'd talk about, when I was adopted at the age of 5, brought into a Southern Baptist household here in Southern Tennessee, here in the Bible Belt. Not sure exactly where they adopted me from. I never really tried to find that out, but when I was brought here, I was brought into this religious household, and one of the first things that I remember when I was brought into this household, my mother, very religious woman. My dad wasn't quite as religious, of course. Went to church every Sunday and Wednesday and whatever, but I remember after they adopted me, I was sitting there writing with a crayon with my left hand because I was left-handed. And I remember my mother running into the room and seeing me writing with my left hand, knocking the crayon out of my hand and telling me, "You don't write left-handed here. Left-handed is of the devil." So it scared the shit out of me when she did that because I didn't know what was going on. 5 years old, I was just drawing with a crayon like I always did, And so she put the crayon in my right hand, told me, "You write right-handed, left-handed is of the devil." So whatever, but so I just stuck the crayon back in my left hand. I said, "Well, I'm left-handed," and I started drawing with my crayon again. And so then I got smacked and crayon put back in my right hand. Eventually, I learned to just go ahead and write with my right hand to just avoid all that kind of bullshit. But that's just one of the first things that happened to me. But as I grew older, as time progressed, this religious indoctrination just kept on happening. More so and more so the older I got. Then by the time I was about 11, I guess, I started really thinking about it. And I couldn't see how this God that they kept talking about could possibly be real. Even at the age of 11, I just didn't see how it could be real. But one thing I always did is I always required evidence for everything. And of course, I told my mother and my dad that I didn't see how this could possibly be real. But that's when they started really hammering it into my head, sending me to Bible classes and stuff like that. And it was ridiculous. And looking back on it, I really fucking hate them for it because I really think that's the worst thing that you could possibly do is force these things into a young kid's mind. It destroys their mind. I can't fucking stand it. So anyway, by the time I was like 12, I was really giving them a hard time about the whole religion thing and the God thing. I couldn't believe it. So by the time I was 12, I just told my mother, "Look, all this stuff you're trying to put in my head, I just don't believe it." So then she takes me to a psychiatrist, right? And it's kind of funny because she takes me to this psychiatrist and tells him I've got to be crazy because I don't believe in this God that they believe in. And that really did a lot of damage. But so I saw the psychiatrist for about a month, you know, and he talked to me alone. Then he talked to my parents, and when it was all over, he calls my dad in there, and he says, "Look, I think your son is perfectly normal. Seems to be." He said, "But your wife may be crazy." And looking back on that, I thought that was just the funniest fucking thing that could possibly have happened. But a lot of people I've seen here in my area where I live didn't come out so lucky. They didn't question it. They just accepted it for what it is. And I never could do that. I always required evidence for it, for anything. And that's one thing I've never did, is force anything on my children, whether it's non-belief or belief in anything. And my children didn't even know that I was atheist until they were already grown. I never tried to force my non-belief on them. I always let them decide for themselves, even though, you know, my ex-wife says she's religious or whatever, and she tried to put it into their heads, and of course her mother did too, who's super religious. And there's kind of a funny story about that. When I first started seeing my ex-wife, her family's Church of God, so I agreed to go with her to her Church of God or whatever. And sitting there, and the people just started speaking in tongues, and I laughed. You know, they weren't too pleased with me laughing, but that was just the funniest and craziest shit that I had ever seen. I'd never seen it in real life. People running around speaking in tongues, and, you know, literally running around in the sanctuary, running into walls and everything, like jump back up, "Oh, I'm okay." It had to fucking hurt. But I do remember one time I was sitting there in this Church of God with my now ex-wife, and the preacher takes off running, speaking in tongues, and he comes running across the pews behind me, and I look back, and he almost runs over my ass. I have to jump out of the way. And I thought that was funny and crazy. But, you know, you seeing these people just going nuts, speaking in tongues. You don't know what the hell they're saying. They say it's the heavenly language, and that's just, who's supposed to decipher that shit? And they say, well, only somebody that's qualified can decipher it. And that's the thing about religion. It's just passed down from generation to generation, and I give it no credit at all for anything except for damaging people's minds, literally fucking people up. But back to the subject, that I never tried to put my non-belief into my children's heads, even though I knew that even my mother tried to put these Christian beliefs into my children's heads. And now I have grandchildren, and it's really something hard to deal with, seeing, like, my granddaughter, who's staying with my mother now, and I walk in and I see these little Noah's Ark books, little children's books about Noah's Ark, with all the little animals sticking out of the ark, and Noah and all of them waving and smiling and everything. You know, you're gonna be happy now that you got 8 people that survived this fucking flood, and 2 of each animal, while millions or billions of people drowned. That's really something good to put in your kids' head. Yeah. I just hope that my grandchildren will grow up and they'll realize that all this is bullshit. I hope, like I did. But as my children grew up, my other side of the family tried to put this belief into them. And I never said anything about my non-belief until they got old enough. And then my youngest daughter, one day, she looked at me and she said, I just don't see how this God could be real. How could it be real? And she was asking me about it. And that's when I came out and just told her, I don't believe in this God either. And then we kind of had a connection there. And I've been talking to her about it since then. And then one of my other daughters came out and told me that she didn't really believe it either. And I've been talking to her also. But that's the best I could do, is just wait until they got old enough and ask me about it. And that's, I think that's what everyone should do. They shouldn't force these beliefs on their children when they're that young. They should wait until they're old enough, wait till they reach the age that they can understand all these things. And then if they want to talk to them about religions, I think that's fine. But why force this one God on a child when all these other gods have been worshipped in the past? But I realize that's just part of the religious indoctrination. And they look at it as, get them while they're young, put it in their head while they're young, and they'll accept it. And that's what they do. It's like an animal and its prey. They get them while they're the weakest, right? That's the way most religions work. And I despise religion. I've come to just completely fucking despise it because of the things I've seen. And I guess I could go into a little more detail about what really made me just completely hate religion and what made me become, I guess, anti-theist. When I was younger, I didn't even really know what the word atheist meant. I remember in church when I was, I don't know how old I was, but it was like right after Elvis Presley died. And the church people were, we were in Sunday school or whatever, and the church people were saying, well, Elvis died and he was an atheist, and he sang that song, I Did It My Way. And they were saying, well, you can't do it your way. You've got to do it God's way. That's the only way you can do it and it be right. Elvis Presley died and he's in hell now. It's just fucking ridiculous shit. And they catch these children while they're young and put it into their minds. And that's the easiest way for them to do it. And I hate to keep rambling, but I didn't, like I said before, I haven't had time to prepare anything, so I'm just coming off the top of my head with this stuff. Excuse me. I'm just coming off the top of my head with this stuff because I've had so much going on the past few weeks. But let me get back to saying a couple of more things. I won't make this very long because I'm not prepared. But when I got a little older, me and my dad started really clashing about the whole religion thing. And then when I turned 18, I guess, is when it really got out of hand, because I just kept telling them I don't believe all this, and they just kept trying to put it into my head. But when I turned 18, right after that, my dad decides that, just sat me down and said, well, you're either going to believe this or not or whatever, but we're going to disown you if you can't believe this. And I said, well, I don't believe it. You can do whatever you want to about it. You can disown me. You can do whatever you want to. And so he jumps up and he said, get up. I'm just going to beat the hell out of you. And so the fight ensued after that. Decided he was just going to kick my ass. Well, he got me in a headlock, whatever. I said, you better just stop right now. He said, no, I'm just going to go ahead and choke you to death. so nobody else will have to put up with you. So I just threw him over my shoulder and I stomped the shit out of him, right? So he goes to get his gun. He said, I'm just going to go get my gun. I'm going to blow your damn brains out, get rid of you. Nobody will have to deal with your non-believing atheist ass or whatever. And if my mom hadn't stopped him, he probably would have got his gun and blown my brains out right then. And at that point, I knew that I just hated the whole religious thing. Look what it does with these people's minds. It's just, it makes them crazy. Crazy, literally fucking crazy. And it really did something to me. It damaged me for a while. And even after that, in some of the years after that, like when me and my ex-wife separated, you know, I started thinking, well, what if, could I be wrong about this? Or it's really fucked me up over the years, but I just kept thinking, well, maybe I could be wrong, and then I'd think about it, and no, you know I don't believe in this God, but why are all these other people just so fucking nuts about it? Why do they keep on and on, trying to just put it in people's heads and telling me I'm going to hell if I don't believe, and all this other bullshit? It's ridiculous. I just can't stand it. But that's something I'm not going to do, even with my grandchildren. I'm not going to try to put my non-belief into their heads. I'm not going to do that. And just as an example, you know, my 3-year-old grandson's been staying here with us for probably about 3 weeks. And he came up to me the other day and he said something about Jesus. So Jesus did this, or what does Jesus, and then he said, well, what does Jesus do? And I had to say this. It's probably wrong. He's 3. He's not going to remember it. But I said, well, Jesus sometimes mows the lawn. He mows the grass. Sometimes he trims bushes and all that. And then he looked at me and he said, Jesus trims the bushes. I said, yeah, if you hire him, you know, if he's whatever. But just to end it, just to say a few more things. I'm sorry this video's been all over the place, and I should have been better prepared, but I just haven't had the time because of everything that's been going on the past few weeks. But thank you for bearing with me, and to end this, I guess I'll just say how I became anti-theist, really, and when I started speaking out. Pretty much, I guess it was 2011, when my dad died. You know, I'd been atheist for a long time, but I really didn't speak out. I didn't really say that much, because I just looked at it as, you know, people want to believe whatever. I don't believe, that's fine. But when I was sitting there with my dad just before he died, and him sitting there so worried about not getting into heaven because this one person he didn't help. He was so worried about not getting into heaven because he didn't help this one person years ago. And the only thing that I knew to say to him was, look, Dad, you don't have anything to worry about. Of course, he knew about my non-belief or whatever, and he knew that I was atheist, but he told me all about that, and he was scared to death. Just terrified of not getting into heaven because he didn't do this one thing to help this one person. That really got to me, and that's when I decided I need to speak out a little bit on whatever level I can. I'm not a highly educated person, but I like to speak out on whatever level I can and say what I can, and maybe help somebody on whatever level. So I guess this is the video I wanted to make for this, and sorry I was all over the place. I didn't have anything prepared. And if I'm invited to speak in the next one, in the next convention, hopefully I will be. I'll make sure that I'm better prepared. But as I said, some things have happened that I didn't foresee happening, and I haven't had that much time. So I'll just end this here, and I hope it's all right. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you guys later.